Welcome back to another episode of Value Tech with EOD. We are trying to bridge the gap between the business and technology. Today, I'm excited to speak with Bron Davies, the Chief Technology Officer of ProPlans. Thank you, Bron, for coming here. Welcome to my show.
Yeah, absolutely, Yudi. It's a pleasure.
So, let's start. How did you enter into the technology?
Wow, that goes back a ways. It was 1998, as I recall. Probably actually a little earlier than that, 96, when I got my first job in Silicon Valley. I was actually studying before that to be a chemical engineer,
Oh,
and
really? I'm a chemical engineer too.
yeah, yeah. So I was really excited about it. I got studying. I was getting close to my finishing my second year, and met my wife, and we've been married 30 years now. So I she says that I blame her, but I don't. It's my fault. I stopped studying. I get so wrapped up. But she and I have had a wonderful relationship for 30 years and raised three kids. So no regrets there at all. But I did not continue studying at that point, and got a job doing quality assurance in Silicon Valley, and that was at a company that at the time produced digital audio conversion and software synthesizers and libraries and that sort of thing. I still have the product that I worked on that was released for Windows 95. And so it was an interesting experience. It gave me a lot of perspective on software development, and as a QA engineer, a different perspective than most software developers start out with, because I was focused more on the experience and the end user. So from there, I started learning scripting and doing some things. The jobs were in very high demand, so I quickly got into consulting, and started working for some companies that don't exist anymore. But from that springboard, I started learning how to code in various languages, and experiencing different platforms, and just building up my skill. And that was a very exciting time, because the internet was just nascent, and very pre Y2K, and all of that. So yeah, that's kind of where it started for me.
It's awesome. Yeah, I remember that bus before that free Y2K, and I was in high school though.
Yeah.
So, yeah, firstly, congratulations for 30 years of marriage. That's awesome to know. So, over the period, right? So, now let's talk about your current role. What are you exactly working on? No?
Yeah. So ProPlans is a software company that is building tools to solve the communication problem in construction, whether it's from the general contractor to the architect or the finance team, the owners, and the boots on the ground, the people actually doing the work, the trades. There's a huge communication gap that has to be solved. And we're working on this end-to-end platform that brings everything into one space. It's sort of like a Slack, if you will, for construction, but very specifically designed for their needs, because there's not one solution that just automatically works for all of these different roles. So even on a single project for residential build out, say a home, there's over 100 people that get involved. So there's like I said, architects, GCs, electricians, and plumbers, and the like. So you can imagine the lines of communication can get interrupted very easily. People trying to find the tools that they need and the materials that they need, and making sure that work gets done in the proper order so that there isn't time wasted. The industry as a whole experiences about 15% of work waste and overages due to rework or litigation that just come right out of the budget for a build. So If you spend $1 million on a home, $150,000 on average is just rework and waste. So it's a huge problem. It costs billions of dollars just in the United States, and um, the ProPlan solution, has the documents, the plans, the messaging, and it does it in multiple languages as well.
Awesome, awesome. So how big is the company?
So we're just a startup getting out of the gate. We have an app already in the app stores, and a web enabled version for desktops, and it will be launched with our first official release later this year.
Oh wow, congratulations. So as a CTO, what is the challenge to make a decision in a company?
So the decision making challenges are, at this stage, is particularly very critical. So if you're dealing with a fixed budget and maybe a limited number of resources on your team, uh, decisions that you make at this point can direct the company in a completely different trajectory later on down the road. Think of the analogy of an airplane trying to reach its destination, and if the bearings are off by a single degree, then you don't end up at the destination. You end up hundreds of miles away, and so constant course correction is needed. For a startup, that means choosing the right technologies up front, putting together a team that works effectively, and also being able to get user feedback quickly. And that's what I find is the most valuable, because you're not going to be able to guess, everything that needs to happen up front. We have a great design leader, and there's a lot of direction that we gain just from that. But it's also the feedback that we get from the people who are beta testing the applications that actually feed into our development pipeline, whether it's a bug or it's just an experience that needs to be improved. For particularly for our app, we want it to be so easy to use that somebody who's not really a technical person can pick it up and feel comfortable with it right away. So that's really where the decision making process starts is with the users.
Excellent. That's a very good analogy, the airplane analogy. I like that. And so over the years, you have played different roles in different companies, right? So what's been the biggest evolution in your mindset as a technologist?
Well, I'd say every technical person with a technical background at some point gains seniority. After about 10 years, sometimes sooner, someone in their career will decide, look, I need to do more, I need to grow, and being team leadership is the next step. Not everyone chooses that, and there's nothing wrong with that. But at some point, if you want to progress in your career, you need to take the jump, right? And say, I'm not just an individual contributor anymore. I'm going to lead the team. I'm going to manage them, right? And you start doing less and less technical work, right? But you are making decisions that impact the whole team and can either help or hinder their progress. So at that point in my career where I made that decision, I was being pulled in multiple directions at the company that I worked for, because I had demonstrated, some, important proficiencies that, had a huge impact on the product. So that that role of being the expert for multiple people, or at least being introduced to new areas of the company where maybe I wasn't more as comfortable. That was a skill that I developed at that time, is just getting integrated into a team that needed my help, but I didn't know anything about what they were doing. But at that stage, I was like, this is great that they need me, but I am also not really growing. I'm just being used for my expertise, and I'm not really teaching anyone, not really leading or gaining new skills. So that it was at that point that I changed employment, to get a leadership role somewhere else. And I think the real mind shift there was, instead of just thinking about what I would do, I have to think about how to teach someone else how to do it. And you get into more of a, I'm unblocking my team from their issues. I'm helping them with their problems. I'm making them more, yeah, I'm making their productivity go up just by, helping them with their day to day work, but also making decisions that, either resolve conflict or um, bring, some level of improvement to the process rather than just individual contributions.
That's a very good point that you brought up, and it is the case with so many people. In fact, at some point, even I had the same situation. When you want to grow in the career, right? From individual contributor to some other, some next level. Let's say a lot of the complaints that I hear, or maybe the feedback I hear from my peers or ex-colleagues, or from my followers on social media, they have a hard time when they make a decision to grow and go to the next level. They are really having a hard time in
Yeah.
accepting. They don't have mentors, let's say, or the positions that they are applying, maybe they are getting the feedback like, okay, you are not the right fit, because you don't have this background, so and so, whatever. So how did that happen in your life? And do you have a mentor at all, or how did you approach that?
Yeah, I had some great examples, in my early career of just managers who understood what I needed and were willing to be flexible and give me the room to grow. Even from that first position that I talked to you about, my manager had um, a lot of good energy and positivity, and said, when we have a challenge that comes up, we look to anyone on the team, but particularly, if you're interested in growing in a certain area, finding opportunities and leading into that. So um, another great mentor, I would say, is just you reach out to people now online more than you do in the office in a lot of ways, because you're a maybe you work from home, or B, you don't feel comfortable talking to somebody, hey, I want to grow out of my position, right? My current position is limiting my ability to grow. And, you talk to your manager and they think, oh, this guy's going to leave, I've got to,
Correct.
you get worried that they're going to perceive that the wrong way. So I actually ended up on a lot of forums and talking to people about, where they grow, and just friends that also had similar experiences, who were further along in their careers, and look people that I look up to.
Great. And you mentioned one point earlier that when you want to really level up, you need to be having the mindset of helping others or mentoring others, right? So
Yeah,
how did you get that knowledge? I mean, in that early stage or over the years of experience?
yeah. I think it's a lot of it's specific to where you're at, in terms of the organization. When you're in a larger organization, I feel like people are less likely to try to help you out. They kind of live in their silo, and that's kind of what drew me into the startup world. Was I love small teams, right? That work tightly together, and the mentality there is more cooperative than most large corporations, where if I have a suggestion and nobody listens to it, then you feel shut down, and or it has to go and get passed on before anything happens. Um, and so I think more people, I think people can grow more in that kind of environment where it's small and you have a bigger impact, and you can also see the repercussions of your choices when you make an impact, as far as is it positive, is it negative? We learn from our mistakes, and we have to be willing to accept that a mistake is going to happen, and how do we deal with it?
It's a good point. I mean, You get exposure to working on multiple things when you are working with a startup, but it also comes with some challenges, like you may not be having the required amount of budget for the vision that what you have, or maybe the resource support. How do you handle that?
Yeah, I think it breeds innovation, honestly, being resource constrained. So, if you, uh, for instance, we were working on probably one of the very first SaaS help desk products at one of my jobs. I don't know how long it's been. It's probably been 20 years. But it was, they had trouble getting startup times of the application to be fast enough to qualify as a software as a service. You expect it to be instantly available, and being able to solve that problem, like it changed everything. Like we didn't have to worry about it anymore. And I think if you take the initiative to go after a problem, and you see, we're not a huge company. We don't have tens of upon dozens of people to go after this problem. Then you invent new ways of doing something, and it ends up being more efficient and working better than if you had tried to just spend more money to solve the problem.
Excellent. So for the upcoming tech leaders, what kind of leadership styles are different, right? So what kind of leadership style is more appropriate for the with the current trend?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
But for people like newcomers, um, everybody has a different leadership style. In the current trend, with the ongoing drastic changes in the technology, there is a lot of pressure from the senior leaders on the budget constraints, or target goals. What kind of a leadership style is more appropriate?
Yeah. So I'd say if you're, trying to get more done with less, I think it's better to be transparent about it, right? And instead of saying, we have to, it's hard to say because leadership styles vary greatly between personalities. What's in the way that you communicate it, really. If your communication style is to dictate and try to be very prescriptive in the way that you want things done, you better have a very good vision of where it's going to take you. Otherwise, you could be making a huge mistake and leading the entire team, into something that's going to be, bad for the product, bad for the company. So I think it's always best to get information from the team first, right? Get all of their ideas and even challenge them to come up with different ideas than what they've done in the past, because you can find that your first idea sounds really great, but if you challenge them to find another solution, you might find out that they didn't think hard enough, right? Just think about it a little longer, you'll get something better. Or it could be that you have two solutions that you can combine and get an even better solution to that problem. And being budget constrained, like I said, it's not a weakness. It can actually lead to innovation and better technology, because a company like Facebook, if they have a performance issue, well, they can just spend more on servers. But when you're a small company, you have to figure that out and get it down to a a level that works for something with fewer resources.
What is your leadership style? Lead from the front, or lead from the back, or depending on the situation?
Yeah, I'm definitely more of a, you work with me, I work with you. You don't work for me, and that's what I think makes the most difference, because people will see that you're not just trying to push them in a certain direction, that you're actually listening. Ultimately, you have to make the decision, right? You can't just let a democracy, happen every time, but with that confidence that your people have, that they've been listened to, that they've been heard, they're more likely to accept that you've made the right choice because they know that you've considered all of the options, and um, that they understand why one direction has been taken.
Yeah, that's a very good takeaway for our listeners. So coming to the startups, right? If you have to work for a large size company, so how does the leadership style change there?
Yeah, the classic example that I turn to is American Airlines. Very large. I mean, one of the largest in the world, Fortune 100, right? And worked in their Android app group, and they had multiple silos for the app team, the web team, the people that work on the kiosks, and trying to keep them all coordinated and functioning the same. I mean, it's hundreds of people, um, and it's a pattern that I've seen over and over, that ideas should come from the team. They're in the middle of it. They're dealing with all of the details. Um, there's also your customers, right? They can give you good feedback, and if the ideas are only coming from the top, then you're probably not making the right decision. And if you're not able to listen to, the people that are down in the individual contributor area, right? Lower level individuals that really know the details. If you're not listening to them, then you've lost a real opportunity. And that tends to be a pattern that I see a lot, is that people feel like they have power, I guess, that that suddenly, they're in charge of a large group, and they feel that responsibility maybe, and they lose sight of the fact that it's really just a small team that's been made larger. Just because it's so large doesn't mean that your mindset has to change. And I think people have a tendency to get this concept in their head that you know, it's, they have bigger decisions to make now, right? Because it affects so many people. And while the consequences, right, should be considered of every decision, I think in those larger companies, they just start to forget that it's the individual contributors that actually know what's going on, and they get out of touch. And so that to avoid that, what I like to do is to treat every organization like a startup. If you're, the VP of the department, right, you have probably 5 people that directly answer to you, but another 200 people that are in that department. Like, how much do you know about each job? How much involvement do you have with the individual contributors in that department? Do you ever spend time with them and learn help what their problems are? What is causing them pain in their day, right? And you want that to be as smooth as possible, because when you alleviate that pain, that means you've alleviated it for 100 people, and everyone's more productive and they're happier in their jobs because they feel like they're being heard, and that they're able to produce more.
That's a good point. So when you have that hierarchical structure, right? Do you have the control at the ground level, or how often you can have the access to go at the ground level, at the low level, and then start working with them? The reason I'm asking is that is most of the times in the business world, it's a common practice by the business owners or the CEOs. They want to have close connection with the ground level so that they know what is happening at there and then make the decisions.
Yeah, I think it really just comes down to time. If you're managing your time, and my advice would be to carve out 1 hour a week, and that's all you really need to say. I'm going to meet with this person, and they don't need to feel threatened, right? They just need to know that you're on their side and that you want to know how things are going for them, right? Um, I'm I'm the supervisor for a residential build. Let's say we'll go back to construction. They're building 150 homes in a a new development, and if and every construction project has its own idiosyncrasies, little quirks about it, depending on the location and the type of build that it is, and so forth. So, if you're that supervisor and you haven't gone to the work site and said, "Hey, how's it going?" Well, you might find out that half of the workforce is Spanish speaking, and then there's like another quarter that don't speak any Spanish at all, and they have trouble communicating, right? And you might find out that there's not enough tools to go around, right, for a particular trade. Like there's and these are things that maybe people are saying that they need, or they don't voice it because they're afraid that they'll be that there's a cost to it, that there's retribution, like, oh, why didn't you say sooner, or you never know, right? Sometimes people are just afraid to speak up. But when you come to them, right, and you say, I want to know what will help you get your job done better. I'm not saying that you're not doing it well, but you know better than anyone else how to do your job. And your feedback is valuable to me. I want to know how I can improve the situation for you. And I think people are diffused by that, and they're willing to give honest feedback rather than talk to your direct manager and he'll pass the message on to me. That situation can sometimes be even more difficult for them to speak up and talk to it.
That's a very good point. But the reality is, a lot of the times we miss that level of connection with the with the low level or ground level, basically.
Yeah, and it doesn't take a lot of
Definitely.
time. It doesn't really take a lot of time. All you need is a little bit carved out for someone, and different areas. Right? You might have multiple areas that you need to revisit, but
Nice. So, what about AI exposure? I mean, right now, without AI, no company is doing any business, right? So, or is it really worth that hype?
yeah. So I do a lot of work in AI actually, and a lot of people are worried that AI is going to replace their job, particularly in software, because AI is very good at writing code. It's not perfect, but as we know, it just improves and improves, and the technology gets better and better. I try to liken it to spell check in Word, right? People started spell checking their documents in Word, like us back in ages ago when I was when I was younger. But when that started happening, like it was no longer acceptable to release a document that had spelling errors and even grammar errors, because now they could also check grammar with their word processing software. And the same thing is happening with AI, right? If you can't reword a sentence so that it makes sense, you should be using AI if you're not sure it makes sense. Um, and AI is coming in all sorts of areas, lots of different professions and in different ways, and it's very threatening. But I think that ultimately we'll find that it's a new tool that everybody can use and get their jobs done more efficiently and more proficiently. Um, in particularly in my industry, if you're not using AI now, then you're already behind the curve. You're not as productive as someone who is using it. So it's become very obvious that it's here to stay. Right? It's not just a gimmick. It's going to get more and more capable,
Not like
and
ours.
yeah, and there will be some jobs that don't exist after a while because of AI, and people will be able to do something new that isn't so mundane and can't be replaced by a machine.
Awesome. So, how do you align your long-term vision with your daily execution of the task as a CTO?
So the main way I think is time management. Honestly, if you have a high level set of goals, let's say you pick three goals, we're gonna solve this problem. We're going to, address user concerns, or, it might be just a budget and a forecast, right? You have to, you have a deadline for these things, right? Or it might be just an ongoing process that you're always on top of. You have to carve out time for each task, so that you're thinking strategically but executing in a day-to-day fashion, right? Um, by putting time on the calendar to say it's time to work on this, well, it might not be your favorite thing to do, but if you take on the stuff that really matters first, you'll find that, the rest of your workload goes a lot easier.
Yeah, that's a good point. So you mentioned the calendar. How do you handle your scheduling? I mean, right now it's all meetings, calendars are overbooked, right? So how do you handle that?
Yeah. Um, so let's say I have a specific client that needs to be needs an estimate. Let's say I'll put some time on my calendar to dedicate to that task, because I've got to prepare for the meeting ahead of time. Otherwise, time can overrun on something else. And if you're managing your time that way, then whatever it is you're currently doing can be stopped, because you know that if you don't do it where you've slotted in the time, you're going to lose that opportunity, and something's going to suffer down the line. And time management, I can't stress enough. It's something that I learned as I started my own consulting business, because I had competing priorities between clients, and you're never just working on one client. When you're consulting, there's always the next one, and you try to keep that sales pipeline going as well. So that was probably the busiest time of my career, was when I started my own consulting business, because I was wearing all the hats.
Yeah.
you know,
Do you mind going deeper into your consulting business?
yeah, sure.
What it is about? What exactly it is serving?
Yeah. So in 2011, I went out on my own. I was finally at the limit of where I could really grow in my position. So I went ahead and thought, I'll go on my own. I'll learn some things. I was very ill prepared, right? I didn't know how to run a business. I figured I would just learn as I go. I did take some courses, some stuff from the SBA, got some materials from them, and online, discussion of people starting technology, companies. All of that information was kind of obsolete almost as soon as I implemented it. And so, um, particularly, when you're dealing with technology startups, everything's new every time, and it's a lot to consume. So, I really, was baptized by fire, if you will, because I just went into it, and I started a business. I had a couple of prospects that I could work with, and I did a lot of online outreach through forums, just helping people, and that was primarily how I got a lot of my business at that time. And it was, it's always about relationships, really. That's really what I think I learned the most, was that business was about relationships. Companies are just a bunch of people. If a company has a big name, that you kind of get a little scared of that, right? Because, man, I've never dealt with such a big company. It turns out they're just a bunch of people. And if you're good with people, and you can relate to them and find ways to, create relationships, that's what's really important, and it helps, kind of ease your nerves, right, about talking to people. Because when you're a technology person, that's just generally not your strong suit. Is making connections with others, that especially strange people, right? Somebody you don't know. And um, there's I'd say if you're not ready to do that, then uh, figure that out first. You've got to have good relationships with people and be able to maintain those in order to survive in a startup.
So, as a business owner, what do you think? What the biggest mistake that early founders will make?
Mistakes that any founder would make. There's a lot. There's a lot that can happen. Most businesses, I think if you're starting a business, you find this out pretty early on that most businesses fail within the first year or two. And by fail, meaning like they actually shut their doors. They're not, you don't have any business. Um, my company, when I started it, was, I grew pretty quickly, added people, and consistently found new business starting out. But eventually, I got a client that was so big that like they consumed all of my resources, my contractors and employees. Like almost everyone was working for this company, this client, and I didn't prepare for that. Right, I wasn't ready to, somehow have pipeline and be able to continue to grow so that when that project shut down, eventually I didn't have anything to fill it in. And so, just because you're good at what you do doesn't mean you're good at everything else. And I'm not a marketing and sales person, right? It's just not my forte. And that's knowing that that's where my weakness is. I could have, more proactively found people and find some way to trust them, right? So, someone you can trust to bring in and fill in those gaps. While my expertise was essentially the product we were selling, um, I still needed to run a business, and a business requires leads and it requires sales flow and somebody to close those deals. And that was something I just didn't really fully understand. Right? I thought, oh, all my people are busy. We're billing at 100%. It's great. But shortly after that, like I had to come up with a new business plan because once the big client is gone, you don't have anything to fuel it. I think the real lesson there is find your weakness and then find a way to solve for
Have
it.
you ever been broke in the business?
Not entirely, right? There's always been something, but at some point, like if you have a large team and you don't have enough work for all of them to do, in that type of business, in other business models, like you have a product that you're selling and you don't usually have to scale back that quickly. Um, but I can imagine like in a manufacturing business where you're producing product and you fulfill orders based on your customers' needs. You could have a similar situation where a large customer is there and then they disappear. Um, so I've never had to deal with absolute gone broke and had to shut down. My consulting business is still alive and well. Um, and it's how I got into ProPlans. I was mentoring their CEO on doing their pitch and helping them with their business plan, and they started talking to me about their technology, you know, um, they just gaps in their technology leadership, and then invited me in to be a part of their team because they realized this is where we're weak. This is where we need the most help. And so you're networking, you're finding people that can work well with your business, and um, if you're doing that, and you like you said, your network is your net worth. That's where you're going to find that you can survive.
Awesome. Sounds like you're more than a CTO. You know a lot. Across the enterprise, every subject is you are touched. So let's talk about the sales. This is the hottest thing for any company to survive or go great, right? You mentioned building the relationships with the people, but in reality everybody is doing the same thing, right? Everybody wants the leads, everyone wants to build a relationship. So how do you approach to really make it successful relationship?
Yeah, I think uh, the real, in my experience, the way that relationships are built is by asking someone how can I help you, right? It's not pitching a product, because you might be pitching to, and this is a method that some people use, is to just scattershot pitch to everyone, right? Everyone on LinkedIn, everyone in your email list, and just see what sticks. But particularly, like I said, in my experience in my business, if you're coming into to someone's office or you're meeting with them for the first time and you ask them, how can I help you? They will give you an answer that's honest, because they know that, if you're asking honestly what they need, they'll let you know. This has been bothering me for some time. We don't have the right, team makeup, or we're losing people all the time. How can we, improve our retention? And part of what I've done as a consultant is to build teams, and not just build software, build the software team so that they function effectively, and that they can be then transferred over to the client for permanent employment. It's not that easy to solve every problem, right? But if somebody has a real pain point and they feel like you're listening and that you're willing to do whatever it takes for them, then you build a relationship that's based on value as well as trust.
Nice. And what is your strategy in the marketing side?
So for Pro Plans, we have a network of individuals and trades, construction companies that are almost all built on a personal contact. When we launch, it will be either people who have already started beta testing, right, who will be ready to convert to a paid customer, or people that we've already got a relationship with. And excuse me, um, that's going to be our grassroots, approach to marketing. Like I said, I'm not a marketing genius. We have two great people on staff at Pro Plans to do that. If anything, that's why I'm getting out of consulting, because I'm tired of trying to do the marketing and the sales. But for what it's worth, I think it's we're not just selling a product. We're trying to solve a problem for these people in the construction industry that are struggling to communicate. So,
I would say simple. What is the most exciting moment in your career?
oh yes, most exciting moment is something, I'd say. Um, I'd say starting my own business. I mean, it was very exciting. I learned a lot. Um, it was it was that tipping point in my career where either I kind of languish and just continue doing what I'd always been doing, maybe wait for a promotion, but really taking charge of my own career, my own destiny, was very energizing. And I think having done done it once, I might not do it again. But I might advise someone not to do it again. But I still went after startup, working to find that perfect storm of people and opportunity, and market fit to launch a product. I'm still doing that, obviously with Pro Plans, and so I wouldn't say that I've given up. And so I must be addicted to it. I just love launching product and launching new ventures. There's something addictive about it, and seeing some not work out, but also knowing that I can make it work, right? That because multiple times in the past I've worked with clients and helped them get acquired by someone else, and they've had a successful exit. That's always been very exciting to me.
Excellent. So when you have your own business, that's really exciting. I totally agree on that. But at the same time, you'll be also having challenges or issues, problems every day on a day-to-day basis, right? There will be moments where you will be losing the money, or your stakes
Yeah.
going down, or maybe overpaying the taxes, whatever the reason. How do you keep up that excitement in those moments?
Yeah, it's all hope, honestly. You continue to work and to build at it, and if you believe in it, right? If you're passionate about it, then it becomes worthwhile. If you're involved in a startup, a business where you put everything into it, usually it's because you have equity and you've got your own heart and soul put into it. You believe in the product. Um, if it doesn't work, right? Some things are out of your control. If it doesn't work, you still know that you put your best into it and that you grew out of that experience. Um, I think if I had to give any advice to listeners about, you know, what it feels like to quote unquote fail, is did you stop trying, right? If you didn't stop trying, then you didn't fail. And that's the advice that I got when I was going into business was um, the the real failure is in giving up. So it might get hard. It almost inevitably gets hard, and things don't seem to be working out. But that just means you need to pivot, change a little bit, solve the problem, and find where your successful road lies.
That's well said. Actually, I don't know if you know this guy, Naval Ravikant.
Hmm.
He's a serial entrepreneur and multi-billionaire. He always says the same thing: companies don't fail when people lose the money, but they fail when the people lose the energy.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely agree with that.
Excellent. So, what's one product that you build failed, and what did you learn from it?
So I had a startup that I was working on probably, I'd say it's been almost 10 years. Uh, yeah, almost 10 years. And it was actually more of a loyalty management automation for small businesses, sort of like Square, like you see in a lot of small businesses now. They have little uh, point of sale systems. You can sign up for their loyalty, and they might have an offer that they can text you. That all of that sort of functionality. I probably worked 12 hours a day for about 6 months to get that product to MVP, but we did it. It was ready very quickly, but you know eventually it just became obvious that we were going in too many directions at once. Instead of trying to focus on just a very good experience in one area, we were going after everything. And I think that's the real reason we ran out of steam. But it was very, very difficult. It's probably one of the most difficult times of my career because I had seriously just given it everything. I took a cut in pay. I didn't, I didn't have any reason to believe that it would fail, so to speak, that, we would lose our client base or our funding. But, like I said, not everything's in your control. And if you give it your all, you know that you did your best, and you don't have to blame yourself.
Looks like it sounds like you have done so many things, right? So, how did you come back from the failures?
Ultimately, I think it was the fact that I'm, responsible to my family. Ultimately, yeah, you might change jobs, you might change companies. Your real responsibility is to your family, and that might be why a lot of startups are founded by people who are single and young, and like they can put more than 12 hours a day into their startup. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of grit. And even though, at that point I was much further along in my career, more mature, like I didn't have a large team to work with. It was just literally me and one other guy writing the code. Um, that we weren't necessarily um, driven just by the company. Our drive was to provide for our families. And so, when the CEO calls one day and says, "We're out of money," right? We don't have there's no way for us to fund any more, product development or delivery. It's like it feels like the worst moment in your life. But ultimately, when you wake up the next day, you see your children, you see your wife, your family, and you just find a way to make it work and provide for them.
Totally agree. The why is more important, right? So your why is your family. That's great.
Yeah.
Have you ever been in a situation where, okay, you mentioned that we are out of funds, right? So how are we going to take it forward from here? Have you ever been raised some money or something like that?
Have I ever been
Raise
in that
money.
position?
Yeah.
Yes. I think, yeah, I can definitely say that I've felt that pain before. And it's not that you try to avoid that pain, but that you just don't want to see that situation come, right? Because you know that you're reliant on this flow of money.
Right.
Um, Sometimes when the only thing stopping you from proceeding and succeeding is money, right? And you say, we need something. Like I will literally find a way to, work and provide for the company so that their work continues till we get to the milestone where, the company is more self-sufficient. Um, if you're willing to do whatever it takes, then it will happen. Like I said, if it's your passion, for ProPlans, our passion is solving communication, and the pain that comes from somebody going to the work site and not having the information that they need to get their job done. And so instead of working for 8 hours, they can only work for 3. And these are pain points that are felt throughout, everyone that's involved in a construction project. Like if it's the owner and I want to see the house built a certain way and it's not happening, like it's very painful. Like this is your dream home, and we want to see all that pain kind of go away. It shouldn't be that difficult, right? For people to be able to plan ahead and get the information that they need and the tools and materials that they need on time, so that they can work a full day and feel, that they've done a good job. I think, especially in the Spanish speaking community, those workers, like, how frustrating would it be to show up to work one day and not be able to communicate with your boss, right? You're cobbling it together, you're using Google Translate, you're not sure you're getting the right translation, all this kind of uh, things that people do to try to make it work. But if it was seamless, right? If it was the perfect situation and you just everything you needed was there, like how much better would their work experience be?
Hmm. Hmm. So does your app solves that problem? I mean, even integrating that translator, anything like that, or
Yeah,
ah,
yeah, absolutely.
that's really
Yeah, we
interesting.
keep a record. So another problem is, if you're trying to text an entire group of workers, like you trying to put that list together is difficult. It just is. I mean, you can't. You try to put together a list of friends who you want to communicate with for a night out on Saturday. It takes a lot of time. But if you know who all the people are on your electrical team, you just can communicate with them in a single message without having to look up all their phone numbers and put that together. Then you've solved a huge communication barrier.
That's interesting. And how do you evaluate a new technology, whether it should be adopted or not?
That's a great question. I'm actually a slow adopter. I don't jump on the latest shiniest thing, mainly because I'm always wary that it's going to fade or isn't fully vetted. Um, there are some technologies that have been widely adopted, that once they've scaled to, a larger customer base, a larger, size company, they then find out we made the wrong choice in the beginning and it doesn't scale as well as we had hoped. And there's, technical issues that arise out of that, which impact the customer experience. And so I'm a slow adopter, honestly. I wait and see. I'll let somebody else go through the pain. And if their experience is, not painful, then yeah, maybe we'll go and adopt it. Um, but that, even having said that, like, adopting technology is something that you can't wait too long on, right? For instance, with AI, 2 years ago, it was kind of cute, right? We could chat GPT, it's funny, and sometimes it gives you the wrong response, and it's like, yeah, but this is going to get so much better, and we need to follow it, right? Maybe I don't integrate it into a mission critical piece of software, but you have to be ready for it, and so you learn about it, and you understand it, so that when it comes time that you want to integrate it or you want to switch to it, you're ready. So it's a long research phase, if you will, for any new technology where I'm concerned.
Dude, if you could redesign the tech stack of your current product, let's say, what would be the technology that you want to adopt?
Oh well, with ProPlans we have a great tech stack. I mean, it's MySQL, React Native, Symfony. Like these are all well established, industry leading technologies. Um, I have to say that a lot of times people choose their technology based on popularity, and that's also a kind of a bad move. I think you can make better choices by looking at the developer experience. So, particularly in software, the tools that you choose can impact how fast you can deliver. And sometimes, if you're not aware of that and you just say, well, Facebook's using this or Netflix is using this, why don't we? Right? It could be a good choice, but you never know the full story of how they got there and how they're experiencing. There's one podcast that goes on into deep dives on this called Pragmatic Engineer. If I can give him a shout out, Gergely Oros. He's always interviewing these engineers who are either at or formerly at these big tech companies, Microsoft and um, Facebook and Apple, and they talk about their technology stacks and how they were built, or it might be just a recent startup that's gotten able to grow really fast. So I'll follow those conversations a lot of times and see what those people are saying. Like, where did we go wrong? How did we correct? What would have we done differently? And if you're not learning from other people's mistakes, then you're going to make those mistakes yourself.
This is smart. This is smart, and I totally agree on that. Me being in the enterprise architecture, right? Often the times I see a lot of architects, Google and then see, okay, Google is using this technology, Netflix is using this architecture framework. Let's use that. Or people follow the Gartner's Magic Quadrant, followed by other large multi-billion-dollar companies, and we have to understand what's the story behind there. How did they get there? Is that the right choice for your situation? Those things are people are missing. Yep, agree. What's your strategy for balancing technical debt with innovation?
Yeah, that's always a tough question because it depends on the organization. Um, some places have their technology stack so ingrained in Java, for instance, that it's almost unavoidable to continue using it. It also depends on the impact that a change in technology can have. So, again, if I go back to my experience at American Airlines, they had some initiatives to enable them to expand into new technologies that they weren't traditionally using. And I thought it was actually a pretty good approach, which was to kind of segment off new technologies that they were going to implement into microservices, right? And and say, look, not everything has to switch over, but we're going to try it over here, and maybe new development goes into that, uh, new technical stack, technology stack, that so that you have a you're able to continue to support what's already there, but you're already thinking about moving in a new direction, and it gives you an opportunity to test it out and verify that it's going to work. Most places don't have that luxury, right? And they might have a team that just this is what they know, right? And if you try to take a too drastic of a diversion, right, to get away from the technical debt, then you end up slowing down the team, right? Their productivity suffers. So the other approach is to slowly migrate to something new, and that works well also. But it's never like all at once. Like we need a total rewrite. Every time that I've seen someone try to do a complete rewrite, means that the code base is essentially frozen. The product doesn't progress. New features don't go out for a long time. People get frustrated with that, and the customers don't like it, and they'll leave, and you're already behind as soon as you start rewriting. So my approach is almost always like progressive. I don't recommend to anyone that they do a total rewrite from scratch. But if you have the resources, right, and you have the talent on hand to say, we've got 10 million lines of code, we're just going to rewrite out all of it. Maybe it'll end up being 5 million lines of code instead. It's still a lot of code. And today, AI actually makes that a lot easier because you can take some of the mundane grunt work of the rewriting process or the upgrading of that code to a new version. You can take it all away just by saying, we're going to get the AI to attack that problem, and we'll deal with the little finer details after that. So it's becoming more and more of a reality where you can just say, we're going to completely rewrite, we're going to switch technology stacks. But I would still that's been my experience, is that a total rewrite doesn't work if you try to do it all at once. It's just too big of a project, and it doesn't deliver fast enough in terms of value.
Mm-hmm. So what you said is true. AI can write the code, and it can do a lot of things, right? For example, a software developer, he can minimize the amount of hours that he can spend on writing the code. So how do you guide them to spend their time towards the other activities, other tasks?
Yeah, it depends on the situation, really. I think the way people are using AI now to write code varies. Like from the vibe coders that are just using English and writing entire applications, they don't understand how it works, and they don't know the product. Therefore, if something goes wrong, they didn't understand that something could go wrong because they're just like, well, it works for me. That's the wrong approach. By all means, I mean, you can get a lot done in that mode, right? If you're just talking to the AI and it's producing working, functioning product, you still have to know how to go into it and say, all right, these things are not right. This isn't going to integrate well with our existing, code base, or there's code's written in a style that's completely different from what we normally see. Somebody has to know how to look at and find those differences and preemptively go after that. Or you can have, a good QA team go in, and you can also use AI to verify your software. But a good QA team that thinks like a human does, and does everything that is kind of like outside of the norm. Most AI code is written so that the happy path works,
Right.
right?
Right.
When you start putting the wrong inputs in, it all falls apart.
Great. Well said. Let's say if I ask you to go back 15 years ago and then sh- see what is the one thing that you could do the thing differently. What is one thing that you can do differently?
That's also a tough question, because I always believe that I'm the sum of my mistakes and successes. Everything that I've learned has been from either a success or a mistake. So I wouldn't say that I would want it to have happened differently, but I definitely wish that my first business took off and grew to 100 million. But that doesn't always happen, and I think for most entrepreneurs, they don't realize that they're going to have to be reborn a couple of times before they get it right. And I'm hoping that now I'm at the stage where that wisdom is accumulated, right, and that I'm ready to see something go to the moon, right, or whatever. But honestly, if we accomplish our mission, that'll be enough.
Okay, let's say if your career was turned into a Netflix series, what do you refer to? Yep.
What do I refer to?
Right.
Like, what's the title of my career? Man, I guess it'd be about how to. That's a really tough
It's so fun,
question,
it
Ed. You
doesn't
really
have to
got
be.
me. Because I'd never really thought about it. And I would title it something kind of just silly, but it's all about how to get back on your feet again. I think I've had so many trials, personal, professional, um, that it's easy to give up and say that it didn't work out. Let's just go back to the way things were. Um, I I think as much as we like to see people succeed, like watching them suffer and get over it is even more inspiring. Because if you look at kind of the movies and TV shows that people really love, like it's all about somebody that's been beaten down and recovered. And I gain a lot of inspiration from kind of those role models, if you will.
Who is your role model?
I hate to say Mr. White, like Walter White, but yeah, he's a chemical engineer, failed in his business. He started a new enterprise, got really successful. But there's a lot of stuff you can learn from Mr. White. Um, I don't know who's my real role model. I have a lot. I think Joel Peterson is one of them. He wrote a book called Leadership, Entrepreneurial Leadership. And he basically hits all the high notes and low notes and all of the advice that you get from that I've heard from many sources. I'm like, oh, Joel's got it all right here in one place, and he started several successful companies. So I think
Excellent.
he's a great role model. Yeah.
So, where can people find you or follow your work?
I keep everything posted on brontech.com. There's links to my other profiles and some of my past work as well. And that I think it's always going to be there. There's been a few offers on the domain. I'm never going to give that up, I don't think.
Okay. What's one final message that you want to share with our listeners?
I'd say if I had to give any advice, it's to be persistent, and find a way to solve your problems if there's something keeping you from doing what you really love to do. Just go after it and don't compromise, so that you're not just chasing the money, but you're chasing your dream.
Thank you so much, Bron, for coming to my show, Value Tech with UD, and helping our listeners to get some insights from your experience. I really enjoyed having this conversation.
Me too. Thank you so much.